So welcome to everybody to the Friday night talk. And our talk this Friday evening is the food-mood connection. It's about thinking and feeling well. And so most of us are aware of how food we eat affects our health. Yeah, caffeine at night, no, for most of us. Although I've just met a friend who can drink coffee at 7 o'clock in the evening and has no problem sleeping. So obviously everybody's bodies are different. But I guess tonight we're looking at exploring the connection between what we eat and how we think and feel, how food affects our thinking, our mood, our consciousness. And there is a saying in the East, as is our food, so becomes our mood. So we're asking our speaker this evening to look into two possible things for us. The food mood or thinking, the food mood link, and the think well to feel well connection. And then secondly, how to boost your food and mood. Our speaker is Christine Westbury. She's joining us from Melbourne, Australia. Christine has spent considerable years as a medical researcher in child disability, working at the Royal Children's Hospital in Melbourne and at the University of Sydney. She currently coordinates the Fitzroy Brahma Kumaris Meditation Centre. And I've had the honor of visiting. It's an amazing building, absolutely amazing. But one of the things that it had well before anybody else had within the organization worldwide is a bookshop that people could walk in off the street and come in and talk to meditators, not just browse books, but actually speak to meditators who had been practicing for a number of years. Normally you would, if you wanted to meet somebody who'd practiced meditation for a number of years and was very experienced, you would need to go up the mountains, into a forest, or into a monastery. And yet here was a place that you walked in with your cup of coffee, or after a busy Friday night on your way home that late in the morning, and you would meet these yogis and you could really talk and feel their presence. And it's this place particularly that was the inspiration for the inner spaces that we have worldwide. So Christine was there starting a trend for us worldwide. Christine's going to speak for the next 35-40 minutes and then do a guided visualization with us. After that, she'll be taking your questions. So please send in your questions via the question answer link or through the chat if you can't access your question and answer link. And I will be putting those questions to her on your behalf. Christine, over to you. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Aarti, for that lovely introduction. So very nice to be able to share with you tonight. And this topic is one that I have a lot of interest in because, even though, as we all know, there's lots of things that will affect our moods, food is one that in many ways we already know, but the area that really interests me the most about it is consciousness and our human thoughts and what they do to food. And so this is where I'd like us to go a little bit tonight. Yes, we are tonight for you, I'm thinking. So I thought I would start though with some of the basics, which you would all probably know, but they are related to just the food groups and also what they also do to our thinking and our moods. And just simple things like getting enough water. I don't know about you, but really when we are parched and we're dehydrated, it does affect our thinking. And in fact, it affects our concentration. So concentration and thinking clearly has a big connection with whether or not I'm dehydrated. And so, of course, 6 glasses a day or so, they do suggest that you have 6 or 7. And so that's really important to pay attention to the water intake. But along with that also is to eat regularly, so our blood sugar levels don't drop, because if they drop, that's we end up with quite a bit of anxiety. We get tired, we get irritable, and even a bit of depression can sort of sneak in too if we're not keeping regular, intake of food. And actually having similar timings is also good too for the body and its digestion. Another one, of course, which you also actually mentioned, was like stimulants. As we know, caffeine and chocolate, which has caffeine too, has a big effect on our highs and lows. For some more than others, but I know for myself, I've had to come off caffeine. I had to go into decaffeinated because it would just put me into mood swings. Great highs and then great sort of lows and tiredness. And so that was another thing. But along with all the stimulants, we've got sugar, especially white sugar. We've got the high energy drinks, and processed foods also bring a lot of highs and lows too. Along with that, of course, what is also required is making sure that we've got enough fiber in our diet for our gut, because they really affect our emotions, the gut, if it's not being given the right fiber. So stress and anxiety can come through that. A lot of actual diseases then sort of spin off from it. Also protein and fats, to be getting a lot of amino acids for the brain, especially through, and of course that helps our thoughts and feelings, and we especially need those through things like legumes and nuts and lentils and seeds, which have probably the best amino acids. And then of course fats, getting the right fats like avocados and nuts, etc. And not also to underestimate, the fruit and vegetables, at least there's a sort of a rule that goes with 5. That means combined fruit and veggies. So 5 of those each day. And they also stimulate mental health through the minerals and the vitamins that they have. So, there's lots of layers that go with what food contains and how that will affect us mentally and emotionally. And of course, that means our moods. Another thing that's probably less well known, but still really worthwhile understanding, and that is the classifications of food according to the Ayurvedic diet. And that's actually goes back probably 2,000 years at least, and was like part of the original medicine. And it's based on what's called prana, which is the life-giving force in foods. So it's that life-giving force in foods and of how they affect our minds and our thoughts. And so there's 3 categories. Some of you would know. They come under the categories of sattvic and rajasic and tamasic. And sattvic means like the true essence of life and foods. And these actually energize the body as well as the mind and brings a lot of mental clarity. And of course, those things include fruit, vegetables, legumes again, also grains, nuts, etc. All of those, they kind of sit within that sattvic category. Then you have the rajasic, which is kind of middling. It's neither too good and it's neither too bad, but still things to be careful of. And these actually are very stimulating foods, and they also bring a lot of agitation and irritation to the mind. And those, of course, there we sit with our caffeine, which of course is the chocolate as well, excessive spices and chilies and peppers, back to refined sugars, old food, stale food. So these also have a big effect as well. And along with that, of course, is the tamsic, which are the ones that it's worthwhile thinking about, because these ones are the ones that really do affect our thinking, our moods and our mind, etc. And of course, it doesn't take much to, we all know what it means to sometimes, you know, the alcohol and probably mind-altering drugs, they can really make the mind go in such a direction that it makes it incredibly, we can actually get a lot of swinging moods, maybe highs, you know, highs, but very much the lows as well. So the moods will get affected by that category of alcohol, mind-altering drugs, pharmaceutical drugs, of course, many of us have to take. And they do actually affect the mind and our thoughts, but there's a reality that we do need to take those. Unless we've found some other alternatives, which if you're lucky to do that, that's great. And of course, along with the tamsic, they are renowned for a lot of apathy. They're renowned for tiredness. Depression can come through those, and inertia. And so ones that we need, though, are things that, you know, more stabilize the mind. Another part of this tamsic category is meat. Now, why? Why does that have an effect on our thoughts, etc.? And so now we're going to getting into the more subtle aspects that go with the foods that we eat. And of course, with meats, one of the things that we're not aware of, but in the main, a lot of the meat production of all the different species of, you know, the meats that are killed for human consumption, they have been fed hormones. Now, just think about these things that will affect also our moods. The hormones, they get fed hormones, steroids, antibiotics, and when you add that with the adrenaline, which the species or those animals, birds, will experience when they know that imminent death is there, that all gets lodged into the flesh of the meat. So you've got adrenaline and you've got hormones, steroids, antibiotics. So these actually, when we ingest those, also have a big effect as well on our thinking, on our moods. But also within the meats, there is the violence that goes with not only the killing of the species, but also the rearing of the species, what goes on, you know, in farmyards. I have to say, my father was a farmer for considerable years when I was growing up. And I did see a lot of these things. So I was a bit of a witness to it all, what would go on. And so there's many other sorts of things, tamsic ones, that do affect the food. It does affect the actual life force in the foods of which we then ingest. But they would probably be enough right now. There are other ones as well, but you can certainly find those out. Now, the other thing, as I was saying earlier, I really do have an interest in human consciousness and human thoughts and the effect that they have on any matter. Because every human thought or every thought that we think it doesn't just stay within here, which is what I used to think, actually. It just stayed within but it actually goes out and permeates and is absorbed by matter, any matter in its path. And that, of course, is our body is part of that. And along with that, of course, is food. So it permeates in such a way that, especially as I say, the body, that so many diseases are a result of our thoughts and our emotions. Psychosomatic illness, they're called. And a lot more of our diseases and illness are created through our thoughts and our emotions than maybe we like to think. But it is a reality. And so, how do we know, that, because we're talking subtle now, how do we know that the frequency of our thoughts and emotions do actually penetrate into matter? There was a really wonderful experiment, well, more than one actually. Someone called Masaru Emoto, a Japanese scientist, he did these experiments. And he did one on the water experiment, in which he would take the same water and put it into vessels like a glass and line it up. And what he would do with that water is that he would, or he had a team in which they would, either put like sounds, like music, words or thoughts and feelings and intentions that were directed to each of the glasses. Each one would have a different word or sound emitted to it. And of course, what happened is then that would be done for a period of time in which they were isolated, each of those glasses of water, and that one person would just focus with, words or thoughts like, I love you, you're so beautiful, and really heartfelt. And someone else would be saying, oh, you disgust me, I really hate you, giving that sort of vibration that would go with it. And then, of course, all the different styles of music. And then those waters would be frozen, and they would shave off some of the, the ice, and then they would examine that under a microscope, I think it was. And it's just extraordinary, the difference in the actual formation of the crystals. Some of them didn't even have crystals. It was just and the color was actually changed in some of them. Some just were big blobs. Some were just sort of, masses of different blacks and browns. And of course, the ones that had the words or thoughts, I love you, you're so beautiful, came out with these pristine crystals, just the most beautiful crystals. And the others that had sort of, you're ugly, I hate you, had the darkest, ugliest, no shape, no formation, but just this blobs. And this has actually been documented and published in journals, this experiment, and it's just one of many, really, to show how that the molecular structure in water transforms when it is exposed to human words, thoughts, feelings, emotions. So the actual molecular structure of water, or in the case of food, also will be transformed in a way which is either elevating it and making it a high frequency, or making it the opposite, lower frequency. There was another experiment called, which was a rice experiment that he did, which is also fascinating, in which he put the same rice, using the same rice from the same sack, the same water, and 3 different containers. And so he put this, he left them for 1 month, the rice covered with the water, And same thing, someone would be, or he would, you know, from a little bit of a different location, would be saying how beautiful you are. I really love and adore how you are. And the other one would, of course, be the more, you are ugly, I hate you. And then in another room, there was the one on, just ignored, totally ignored. And after a month, what happened is the one that was the rice that had been left there, who'd been exposed to the words of love and you're beautiful, similar, but that showed through the food. And the food actually, in that case, the rice had become, it was actually fermented, but it had a very pleasant odor and even a golden color. And the rice that had been exposed to, you're ugly and really don't like you, etc., that just became black after a month. And then the one that where there was just ignored and actually deliberately ignored, there was that sort of vibration given to it, you know, I'm not interested in you sort of thing. That actually went black and rotted. So it's very interesting, this, you know, the transference of human consciousness that gets absorbed, and the molecular structure then, of course, changes. So in relation to that, I had to think about it, and I thought, wow, food is exposed to our thoughts all the way through its whole production. You think about, you know, when food is firstly, we sow it, you know, we grow it, and then we harvest and reap it. And then, of course, we have to transport it. We, of course, let's say, transport it, then it gets to markets and then to supermarkets, and then it eventually gets into our house. Along the way, that food has been exposed to multiple different human beings who are thinking. Now, if they're all thinking thoughts like, what a beautiful day, oh, I'm loving life, you know, this kind of really uplifting vibrational thoughts, that food is actually being, you know, absorbing all of that, and it's actually enhancing it. But if they're having thoughts of stress or worry, that also is being absorbed by the food. Stress, worry, anger, that is being absorbed into the food as well. And so by the time that food gets into my kitchen and I'm holding this product, you know, foods that have absorbed multiple different energies. And I hate to think that probably more negative energies. And when I eat that, or the people I live with eat it, it's going to affect our moods, it's going to affect our thinking. So what do? We have to really work on transforming that energy. Just like Masaru Emoto and the rice and the water experiments, we need to really put a lot of attention into that food to be able to transform the negative energy that it has absorbed along the way. And so in order for that, we have to put a higher frequency, which means really positive, uplifting energy, deliberate, especially even more so, to change our thoughts, to make them as peaceful, as loving, with feelings of gratitude, you know, joy. So that can be absorbed into the food before I eat it, because that will affect also my mind when it comes in, you know, as Akti was saying, you know, as is my food, so is my, how do we call it? You are what you eat, as is my food, so is my mind or my moods. So that transformation process is really, really needed at a level where I need to change my consciousness. So having said all of that, I thought I'd slip in here a little bit of, because I'm a researcher, of course, I do like to research things. And so another study, which I found incredibly interesting, was by this Dr. David Hawkins. And he does a study on the anatomy of consciousness. And what he does is that he calibrates through kinesiology the frequency of emotions and consciousness. And so what he actually was able to produce was that feelings and emotions of shame, they calibrate at a frequency of 20, which is, amazingly, almost close to death. And then you've got, after that, if I remember rightly, apathy, I think, or guilt, one of them. Anyway, guilt, apathy, these are all the layers then, but they are a higher frequency. They just step by step. Apathy, grief, fear, and so it goes on with the negative ones. When we reach a certain level of courage, and interestingly, I didn't know this before. I was explaining earlier, I'm sure some have joined late, I was explaining to Artie how courage has been a big one for me all through my life, or especially the last 30, 40 years, when I wanted to make some changes to my life. And interestingly, with the study of this David Hawkins, it also revealed that when we reach courage and when we start to step up and just make that, have that determination that I'm going to now move in this direction, or I'm going to really work on, having more attention on my thinking, etc. That resonates at 200, and that's the critical point in which we are on our way to be able to raise our consciousness. And then, of course, you go into the levels then of going into peace and love and compassion, all of those, and well, peace and silence, up to the level, highest level is that of 1000. And the 1000 calibration is that of enlightenment. And I don't know, that can be taken it to the level of probably, these founders of religions and things like that, people who really are doing that level of, have that level of consciousness. So from 20 and shame to 1000. So pretty much why I'm explaining this is that that revealed to me that if I see at one level, we talked about the food process and production is absorbing everyone else's food, others' thoughts. Now, we can't stop that. There's no way we can stop the way other human beings are thinking. It's not, But the main thing is, it's my thinking, because that food, when it comes into my house, and I'm still thinking thoughts of annoyance and stress and worry and, agitation about something, even more that food is absorbing that. So I'm adding on top of the other energy that it's got. I've also put my consciousness, my thoughts into that too. So what to do? And so the best thing we can do is to bring about that transformation is, firstly, is at my own level of consciousness to be really working on the issues or, the negative emotions that I carry, because that's going to transfer into the food. As I cook it, wash it, clean it, all of that will happen. And so if I can lift the frequency of my thinking and emotions up beyond that 200 mark, and by having courage to think and make a decision, I don't need to stay in this grief or this shame or this worry, fear. I can do something to shift this. And this is where I reached in my life. I reached that point in which I just thought, I don't want to stay in this anymore. And it affected everything in my life. I'm digressing a bit from food now, but well, in a way not, because that food was being affected. Everything I ate, everything I prepared, because I was languishing a bit too much in those negative things. So it became such a, I just made it a really big objective in my life then to start this transforming and move out of those. And it's not to say I'm permanently out of them. I dip in and I dip out too with, some of these negative emotions, but nowhere near like. And so I'd like to share some of the techniques that I have used. I think sometimes when, there's that level of grief or shame, which is one that many of us have had the experience, or maybe it still is there latent. I always recommend some level of counseling, because I find and I see that helping a lot. But before we go on to looking at a few of the techniques to bring about that transformation of my emotions and thoughts that are affecting the food that I'm preparing and eating, I just thought I would mention the steps of where we've had food production outside being affected by others, and then the food when it's in my kitchen, mindful that food, when it's come in, I go through the process. Well, it goes into the fridge often, fresh veggies especially, but otherwise it's there in the kitchen. Then when I'm about to prepare something, there is, well, the washing of the vegetables or fruit, bringing all the ingredients together. And so it's the washing, it's then the chopping, and then there is the cooking, and then there is the eating. So there's some major steps there in our movement and our working with the food. And so that is a really transformational time to help that food be absorbing and being able to help change that molecular structure of some of those vibrations that it had previously absorbed. And so the kitchen, and I hope you don't mind me saying this, but I kind of like this, to have the thought to make the kitchen a very sacred kind of a place. You can use the language that you prefer, but to make it one that it's a real beautiful, like a little meditation space, or don't know what else you could use. Some people talk about a temple, any of these words, but make it very sacred, because it's like a huge transformation, and through my consciousness and thoughts can go on there. So I can play music and, some nice sort of soft music, or play some words that are really uplifting. So my consciousness gets lifted while I'm doing all the preparation. Now, I know probably a lot of you have got families, and for some reason, kitchens become very noisy places. And I know it's probably very challenging, but I would probably invite you just to experiment. Just give it a try. Maybe just put, your phone's your earplugs in and listen to the music. Have that consciousness. I'm really going to give that sort of love and care to this food, and especially as I'm stirring it, that's a really crucial time, and really put that vibration into the food at that time, and just experiment with it, over a few days, weeks. Don't say to the family what you're doing if you've got family or partners around, and let's just see as to whether or not you get a bit of a different comment about the food, because our as you heard, I'm in a meditation center, and we also have retreat centers, and of which I'm sure you would have heard from Arti. You also have one in Oxford. I'm not sure if the doors are open again yet, but But the retreat centers and anything really to do with meditation and Raj Yoga is very much emphasizes the effect of the food vibration on our minds. And so it's a really big part. So what happens is that for us, especially in the retreat centers, is that we make the meditations, make the actual kitchen, like I said earlier, into something, we make it almost like a meditation room. So we have music playing, pretty much no one's talking. Of course, there has to be a certain level of talking when there's a number of people having to put food together, but mostly very little. And the vibration in the kitchens is almost like stepping into some kind of, very special, even like the churches have got a really beautiful vibration. All the places where people are doing these sorts of things, it has that lovely sort of sacredness. And so often what happens is that people go there and they, of course, go for the retreats. And they always talk about the food. Now, admittedly, it's vegetarian food, but it's not, it's simple. Certainly not lots of expensive ingredients. It's not possible. We don't have that level of ability. But simple vegetarian food. But it is all prepared in that environment, prepared with awareness on their consciousness, and, and so such a difference. So I'd invite you to try this out, just to have your little walk. I keep wanting to say Walkman. Gosh, I'm showing my age. But have your music in, or whichever way, or even before you get into the kitchen, you can just sort of have that thought and that awareness on what I'm going to be thinking with the food prep. And even before eating, I mean, they say, there's all sorts of practices by different groups where they, have this kind of prayer over the food before they eat it. Some say grace or whatever, but, even just to have 10 seconds in silence, just to, again, just as before I start to eat, is just to have that thought, just feeling that gratitude, giving that love to the food again, and just giving that extra current of vibration into the food that's going to affect me when I eat it. So that will help. So yeah, it's quite interesting, the effects of this. And I was talking to someone here just yesterday. She's a mental health nurse, and she was reminded, because we started to talk on this topic, and she was saying how in her line of work, it's very easy to absorb the energy of some of the terrible emotional traumas that people are going through. And she says it really can wear her out and wear her down. And she said this one time she went out to lunch, or went to the home of this person who is a regular meditator, really attention on his thoughts, and he was cooking. So she, obviously had the lunch. She could not believe the feeling of how she just felt so serene inside, so empowered, so that when she went back to work, she felt like she had this total shield of safety and protection around her. So she didn't feel affected by all the vibrations of, her clients. And she knows it was the food and how he had prepared it. And she did double check with him as to what his, consciousness had been while he was preparing it. So something that may sound a bit wafty, but really worth experimenting with. And I think you will find a lot of, changes as well. And also, just another little example is that anyone who loves cooking, does help to love cooking, who loves cooking, puts the time into it, isn't rushed, isn't stressed, etc., and loves the ones that they're cooking for, that food will have an extra vibration. Extra. And we all know that, especially in my day. My mother didn't work, we had a farm, so she did help on the farm, but she was mostly a, homemaker, and she would put a lot of her whole heart and soul into the cooking. And so, often I can think back to the food that, oh, this was so good, this was so good. And I used to think, oh, because of taste, I was thinking it was taste, but no, it's more than that, definitely more than that. It was definitely, the heart and the love that was going into the food as well. So all these things make a difference. So anyways, I thought I would just share, because I thought, okay, now we've reached the point of realizing that changing my consciousness is going to affect that food before I eat it. And it's easy to say that, but it's not always that easy to change some of our old habits and our whole patterns of thinking, as I'm sure many of you who have attempted to change these things, they're not always that easy. And I'll be quite honest, I absolutely, find them challenging at times. So there has to be a few techniques that will help. And not that we've got much time now to share those, but I would say one of the things out of all the techniques would be to start to, if you can, and I really recommend it. I don't know how many sort of professionals who are into change management, into coaching, etc., also recommend this. Give the mind 5 minutes quality empowerment, just 5 minutes before you start your day. Preferably not lying down, but, get up and just sit. If you can play the music or play some uplifting words, but just something that's going to feed into the mind some beautiful thoughts, uplifting, just to be able to settle the mind, that sort of thing, to be able to start the day with that. Because then the mind will be stabilized. It'll just be that much more calm, that much more peaceful, and a lot more stable. So when anything comes our way, what will happen is that we can deal with it, because the mind is so much more stable and capable. So that is one thing, 5 minutes. During the day as well, keep checking in on your thinking. We have certain types of thoughts that we are thinking. I find, and we call this the SOS, take that into the day. SOS is simply stand back and just check, hey, what am I thinking right now? What are my thoughts doing? Where are they? What are you doing? What are my thoughts? Where are they? And often if they've gone into something a bit negative, a little bit stressed, the mere fact of awareness, and it's like a mindfulness too, the awareness of just checking in on those thoughts is enough for often the thoughts to shift. Because interestingly, even the conscience is saying, I shouldn't be thinking like this. I don't want to. It doesn't make me feel good. And I should be thinking more like that, and more, rather than being upset with that person, I should be a bit more compassionate. But the habits are so strong. And so as soon as I check in and I find that my mind, that I see my mind has gone off, onto this negative tangent, it's enough for the mind, and the conscience just goes, hey, come on. We don't want to go there. That's not the kind of thoughts that makes us feel good the rest of the day. Come on, let's move. And often the mind, that will be enough. Often, not always, but often. So that's a simple step, just checking the mind all day long, what kind of thoughts it's thinking. And so it's the S of standing back, separating ourselves out from our thinking, checking in what has been my thoughts up to now, today. And from that, the O means of SOS, just watching and observing, standing back, watching, observing. And then, of course, we've got more of a capability to steer the mind where I prefer it to go, because the need, to be able to steer it, I have to have separated myself away from those thoughts. Otherwise, the emotions that go with negative thoughts and feelings, they can trap me so much. That's why I have to be a little bit separate. Just stand back and watch my movie. Watch the movie of my mind. It's like you would watch any movie. Hey, what's the movie going on in my mind right now? And then by seeing that movie, by standing back, I can then go, hey, be like the director of the movie. No, I don't like this kind of this actor doing this. How about doing it like this? Rehearse a different way of doing things. And also that can mean also at night before going to sleep. I just quickly slip this one in. There's so many different techniques to be able to change our habits and consequently the moods, which consequently will then affect the food of which we are about to prepare and has been affected by others' thinking. So before I go to sleep at night, it takes 1 minute, this is all it takes. Just check in on the great things that happen during the day. Often we just don't appreciate. There's gratitude that many are doing now. I love this thing of the gratitude journal, they call it. Just the lovely things that happen during the day. I just, stopped and smelt the roses in someone's front yard or in the park. Someone let me in on the traffic and I smiled and they smiled. Any little thing that was very, very sweet. Just let that energy, just absorb the energy of that lovely little thing that happened during the day. But then also look at the things that didn't go so well. And, that's still playing on my mind. Because what we're trying to do is that we don't want to take anything negative from today into tomorrow. This is putting a closure to the day, each day. Because pretty much our lives are filled with yesterday, last week, last year, 10 years ago, 20 years ago. We're harboring and holding thoughts that just from the past, which is such a big impact on how I think now, how I feel now. And so if something didn't go well today, let me, okay, OT, I'm wrapping up now. Let me, in that, just rehearse what happened in a way that I would have preferred it or would like it to. So I want to lay down a new habit of how I would respond in that situation the next time so that I'm not feeling bad about it still at the end of the day. And just by rehearsing a new way of doing it, just by thinking, okay, next time I'll say this or I won't say that, and see yourself in that situation, because that similar situation will come again, I've found, just for us to learn the lessons. And think it's great. These lessons are great because they're helping me to change. So those are just some simple little techniques just to get us to help in this transforming. So that's it, OT.
Thank you, Christine. Would you do a very short guided meditation with us? Because we've got lots of questions come through.
Oh, really? Oh. Okay, so it's a guided meditation. Okay, so I'm going to take you into a funny sort of a thing. I'm going to get you to visualize. Now, many of you are sitting in your room, in your homes anyway, and you're right at the edge of your kitchen somewhere. So I'd like you to visualize, close your eyes for this. Just to visualize yourself standing in the doorway of your kitchen and step in to the kitchen, and you've got a certain foods that you're going to prepare for the meal, in your mind. So you go and get all those foods out of the fridge, out of the cupboard, etc., and you put them on the bench. So just see yourself, just Try and do that. So you just visualize yourself now doing that. Now, with all of those things there on the bench, at the same time, you've got your phone and your headset or however, or those pods. And just make sure now you just put on some very soft, lovely music, one that you really like, music that you really love. But something very, very serene, or some lovely words, or just the sound of water running, whatever. So put that on, and you've got everything ready now to prepare. So you're listening to that and letting your mind just become a little bit absorbed in the music and absorbed in that, and just allow your feelings just to become very, very, gentle and soft, and let your mind just become stable and just tell your mind, I'm here right now for something so important. And it really is. I'm about to prepare food that's going to go into my mouth and affect my mind, but also it's going to go into other people's mouths and affect their minds. So I have that thought, and I bring into my mind such high frequency thoughts, of serenity, of peace. I can visualize, beautiful, peaceful scene. And the higher the frequency, the better. The more I can get towards that 1,000, the better. So I bring in those sort of thoughts, and then I wash, and I chop, and I put things into the pot, and I stir, and with my heart and soul, I pour as much love into that pot as I stir. And then just still imagine this. You're in your kitchen and you're preparing the food. You know who you're kind of preparing it for, but especially preparing it for your own mind. And then the food is ready, and it's like you've made it very, very, transformed. And then you've got it on the plates. And then when it's on the plate, you don't say this to others to do, but if you want just for yourself, just for 5 seconds, just to have that stop for 5 seconds and just put that heartfelt love again over the food and allowing it to absorb it more. And pretty much that's what I was saying earlier. When you do this, and you try it out 1, 2, or 3 times, and you might like to try it with just vegetarian, but that's up to you. Just see the kind of responses you get from others who are eating it. So just a little simple visualization to get you ready.
Thank you. I think it's very practical as well, because it will help us when we try it, the whole new approach in the kitchen, and
Yes.
hopefully change our relationship with our kitchen in that way, which is very beautiful. So thank you. There's a number of people, if I can go straight into the questions, there are a number of people asking, could you please give the name of the Japanese scientist that you referred to, and his work with rice and water?
Yeah. His name is Masuro, Masuro, and the last word is, his last name is Emoto, Emoto. 2014, he actually did die, but still, of course, all his experiments and work is still out there. And as with everything now, you'll be able to Google and get all the photos, the pictures of the different, experiments. It's quite fascinating. But try it yourself to prove it to yourself. I haven't done it myself, but someone that I know did. She did the rice one, and she was just it was like mind-blowing to see this difference.
Thank you. Thank you. Second question. If I start to love my food, do you think it will help me to stop abusing it and myself? As I've always eaten too much food, too much junk, and always hated cooking in the kitchen.
Right. I think if we take it, the next step from love is to think about, do I like any negative feelings that I'm getting? If I am sort of feeling in whichever way, which is not a feeling I would like to feel, am I getting those during the day? If I can identify certain feelings that I'm getting in certain emotions and moods, if I can talk to myself and go, I've got a way to be able to shift and change these moods. And in a way, it's kind of a simple technique, really, through food. If we have to convince our mind first. And when I think, well, I am going to be able to transform a lot of my emotions and thinking through the food that I eat, and preferably prepared by myself, then make time. I know what it's like. You can get too busy, or actually, as you say, you don't even like to cook. But now just use it as an experiment. And so, set about certain, recipes, but make them simple, really, really simple, because you don't want to burden. And also try to get more fresh and because processed foods, deep fried foods, sugar are what is creating a lot of problems in our thinking and our emotions and our moods. So we have to convince ourselves of that.
Thank you. Thank you. The next question is, for almost 50 years, I ate with my family and friends, and it was never eating on my own. But for the last 25 years after my husband passed, I'm mostly eating on my own, and there is still a sadness. Is there something I can do to shift that sadness that's connected with eating food on my own rather than with a family or friends?
Well, that's a very amazing question. Yeah, very relevant question. I suppose if we start to get this relationship with the food as being something that's almost like a friend, and that becomes almost like a little companion. That this food is one in which I've prepared it with love from my heart, and I'm giving so much, I'm honoring the matter of food by just giving it that care and attention and love as I prepare it, so that will go into the food. And so when I sit to eat it, it will be like a sort of a funny kind of a companion, I know, but it's something I've nurtured. I've nurtured it from the moment I bought it and the way I prepared it. And now here I am being able to, put this food into the body. And so it's a very lovely connection we make with the food. And so that would be one thing. I mean, I do know of some people, I hope you don't mind sort of mentioning this, but some people who do have this kind of connection with some higher spirit or something, or a higher being. And what they do is have the sense that when they sit to eat, it's like they invoke this, higher spirit. In whatever form. Everyone's got their own different forms and how they see this, those who do have a sense of it. And it's like to invoke that and just say, come and be here with me as I eat. So that is one. I know a few who do use that, and they do feel a lot of soft, connection of not being alone. But it's a very beautiful, relevant question.
Thank you. In earlier generations, and you mentioned it for yourself with your mother, lots of love was shown through cooking. Currently, we're living in very fast times, and so we're having to eat out or order in or eat food on the run. How do we counteract this?
Well, there are always going to be maybe those times. The first thing I would do, that when you do have to do any of those, don't just start eating quickly. Put that food in front of you. And this is back to honoring and gratitude. Think of it, I can't help but say this, but think of the number of people who do not have food to eat. And it's like the gratitude that here I have the ability to have this food. So just to sit with that food and give it so many thoughts of gratitude and the honor that I have to be able to have this food. Now bring in this peace and love and fill that food with that vibration at the eating level. Invariably, I think if we look at our lives, I mean, I am totally one of these frenetic people at times. I'm much better than what I was. But, on the go, everything is always so important to do this, always doing, and not prioritizing things in life. And I really have seen the amazing changes that food that's been prepared by the self or by someone else who also has that same attitude, it makes a huge difference to our thinking and our emotions. And if we start to realize that I want to really treasure having really high frequency, good quality emotions and feelings, and the food is going to help, especially by my preparing it with that love. The eating it also, as I said, the outside food or whatever the kind of food is on the run, that is one thing, but to also combine that along with the food that I've prepared, it's huge, the difference that will make to my mind, my emotions, my thinking, and even that will start to slow me down. I think sometimes we fill our lives with just too much, don't you think? Really, I know for myself, it's often been a habit that goes against us. But I do think it's something we need to treasure.
Sorry, you spoke about 3 categories of food, and the person's saying that they're very new to this philosophy. Could you just say where you got those categories from? What were those categories and where from?
Okay. Ayurvedic. These come through Ayurvedic medicine, but the Ayurvedic principles, which, as I say, they don't date back at least 2,000 years. It's nothing new. It's a very ancient understandings of food groups and food types. And of course, they are based on what is, as I mentioned, prana, which is the life-giving force in food. We're starting to talk now a bit more about the subtle frequency and energy, again, of foods, which, we can't deny. It's a bit like the thought energy that goes into things and transforms matter. We know how quickly our thoughts can affect our bodies and matter. Very quickly we can have so much stress in our heads and be so frenetic and concerned and worried about something. And the next minute our shoulders get in, pain, our back starts to feel bad. Instant. Those thoughts of stress and worry instantly get lodged into the muscles, into the body. So it goes into matter, goes into the body that way, but goes into the food. And so these are the subtle vibrations. And so this, as I say, 2,000 years at least, these classifications have been known. And again, I'd probably suggest, if you've got any interest, just experiment. Like I find maybe a week is not long enough, but just for 2 weeks, just to try sattvic the sattvic foods, which are the true essence, which have the highest quality vibration. So if we're having our consciousness combined with the high level foods frequency, then we're on the way to be able to bring transformation and change to our thinking and emotions. And so pretty much, as I said, the sattvic foods are the ones that are the fruits, the vegetables, the grains, the legumes, the nuts. All of those are the ones that have, such a much higher frequency. So that's probably what I would suggest from that. But you can certainly look into this. Again, I'll put you onto Google to look up all the details on this Ayurvedic categories.
Thank you, Chrissy. Thank you. It truly has been a delight for us here. Yes, it is our evening, but for those of you who question any of this idea of how food affects your lightness of being, your cheerfulness, and your energy as a person, well, how do you look at 4:30 in the morning? And would you be able to give such a detailed, interesting talk? I think, Chrissy, you absolutely show us how it's so visible and practical in our lives. So thank you.